Welcome to today's live interactive presentation of getting students back to school during COVID-19. This is a very complex issue, as everyone out there knows full well. And our presenter today, Ned Einstein, bases his recommendations on over 4 decades of experience as a paratransit operator, router, manufacturer, consultant, and expert witness. We do only have 90 minutes today and a lot of information to cover. So want to get Ned started in here in just a few moments because he's going to need every minute. And we do want to try to get as many questions answered as we can. But do know that it's going to be difficult to fully absorb everything. We are recording this webinar, so it will be available on stnonline.com. And we are recording all of the attendees today and all the questions and feedback. So certainly Ned will follow up individually if we can't get to your question today. So with that said, before I turn things over to Ned for the next hour and a half or so, I do want to quickly familiarize everyone briefly with the webinar console before you and how everything works. So again, like I said, the event is being recorded. You will receive an email notifying you of its availability shortly after the conclusion of the live presentation. To ask questions, simply type them in the question box under your webinar console. Again, if we don't get to your question, don't worry. All questions are being logged, and either Ned or STN staff will get back to you in a timely manner. Please also note the attachments button on your screen. Here you'll find the white paper that Ned authored that goes into depth on these recommendations. Again, a lot of complex things here, a lot of historical information to absorb to really understand where we are and why we are where we are today. So again, I know that there are a lot of state representatives on the call today, school district leaders. I mean, these recommendations that Ned will get into here in a moment are really important. It's a very ambitious plan, but we think it's going to open some eyes. So with that said, I want to go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, again, there is a white paper that is available for download that you can read if you have not already. It's about 18 pages long, so like I said, it's very in-depth. We also have this article published in the digital edition of the October School Transportation News magazine, which came out today, so you can head over to that page, our Digipubs under magazine at the homepage to check that out as well. So again, bringing Ned on here, he spent 45 years in the public transportation field. He has been affiliated with School Transportation News and the school bus community for about 30 years and is a contributing editor to us, an editorial advisor. He has written for School Transportation News as well as School Bus Fleet, National Bus Trader, Metro, and other transportation magazines. Not typical of school bus folks, Ned is intimately familiar with every ground transportation mode, so not just school buses, and has directed or been involved in projects at high levels in every one of them. He designed and operated transportation systems, multiple types, and several modes. He directed the operations of his own 70-vehicle paratransit system for 10 years, daily transporting 1,100 physically and developmentally developed adults to school and work. Ned also works mostly as an expert witness now, including more than 100 school bus cases involving general ed and special needs students. And when he likes the projects, he still works as a consultant. So you can learn more about Ned at his website, transalt.com. So Ned, thank you again for joining us. I know this has been a labor of love, and we've been working on this for a couple months. My first question to you is, what are the goals of the presentation you're gonna outline here for us in a few minutes?
Okay, there's 7 or 8 goals very quickly. First of all, to get every student back to school physically by this March, which I think is possible. 3 days a week physically and 3 days a week virtually. To keep everyone safe at school and on the bus. To get every school bus on the road and very likely about 80 hours a week under this plan. To kickstart the production of school bus OEMs and suppliers once again, because we'll need every bus we can get for a while. To create 5.5 million additional jobs to support this plan. Also, I'll outline the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved during this presentation. I'll explain how to pay for all of this. And the goal is to within a few weeks to hand every state be able to hand its governor a detailed plan specific for the characteristics of everyone's state by mid or late October.
Okay. So there's a quartet of constraints here. And by the way, real quickly, one of our attendees asked, is that a Steinway behind you?
No, that's my Kauai. I have a Steinway, but that's my Kauai.
So Ned, on another webinar, Ned will tickle the keys for us. But back to the presentation. So what are the factors that control and require the need for a plan of this type?
Okay, basically 4 of them. The strongest of them is the reality of social distancing. We know that. We're not going to debate that. Because of that, because we have to be about at least 6 feet apart, that means we can only use 1/4 of the capacity of a school bus to be safe, even with masks. We're at risk of not doing that. And we can all use 1/4 of the capacity of a classroom. So we can't make a bus bigger. We can't make a classroom bigger. Secondly, there's a finite number of school buses and a finite number of classrooms. We can't quadruple the number of school buses to try to solve this problem. We can only put 1/4 as many on a bus. Thirdly, there's the need to get back to physical school and to stay there. I don't think in the beginning everyone has to be at physical school every single day, but we have to have several days a week of physical, real school. That's the way we've learned how to teach. And finally, need to keep everyone safe on the bus and in school.
Okay, so and in my introduction of you, I listed some of your highlights of your career. But for some of attendees who are logging in today, they're wondering, what are your qualifications for creating a plan like this, and why should they listen to you?
There are a number of things in my past, some of which aren't well known, that I think give me unique qualifications for this. The most unusual is that about 45 years ago, a long time ago, when I was in graduate school, I did my master's thesis on the use of a given amount of space by 4 shifts of people. It was called a non-solar day, and it dealt with variations in sleep and all kinds of crazy things. But essentially, it dealt with the ability to use space by 4 shifts of people a week. And that's really what we've got to do now because of social distancing. We can only put 1/4 as many in a space. So we have a certain space, we've got to use it by 4 shifts of people. So I've been thinking about this stuff for 45 years. That gives me an unusual advantage over almost anyone else who's never had a chance to do that. Secondly, along the lines of doing that, I became an expert in sleep and sleep cycles. I know a lot about that. And that's, among other things, is going to affect routing, which I'll get to later. Thirdly, I've designed a lot of transportation systems of many types, fixed route systems, paratransit systems, hybrids, involving taxis. I was a consultant to the person who designed Super Shuttle. So I know a lot of types of systems, and I'm an expert in designing them efficiently. And fourth, during the 10 years I had my own 70-vehicle operation, I did all the routing and scheduling. So I'm pretty good at that. So I have expertise in those areas, but I'm not an expert in many other areas. So I did get a lot of help, I want to acknowledge, particularly from you, Ryan, and even from the editor of another magazine I write for, National Bus Trader, Larry Plackno, and others in the field, and a wide range of other sources, TV, magazines, newspapers. So I listened and I read and I tried to organize my thoughts. So in the areas I'm not an expert, I learned as much as I can. I'm trying to integrate all this together. What I wanted to talk about next very quickly is how we got here. There's not a clear understanding, I believe, among a lot of people of how we got into this mess and why we're the only country that seems to have problems as deep as us. We have 4% of the world's population and 21% of the cases. And I don't think it's going to do us any good to try to blame this on any single person. I think that's a mistake. There are 3 themes that began in this country about 40 years ago that really led to where we are now. And maybe this is the first time you're hearing them, and maybe you may not like them. But the first one is what I call the U.S. Jobs Elimination Program. That began unofficially in about 1973 with our first energy crisis. And just as a quick list of The jobs that disappeared: receptionists, typists, file clerks, musicians, paper boys, longshoremen, repairmen, tool and die makers, mail sorters, answering service personnel, travel agents, accountants, cashiers, bookstores, retail store owners, on and on and on. Tens and tens of millions of people of these jobs disappeared. We have other jobs. So we got more coders now, but a lot of jobs disappeared. Second of all, when President Reagan took office, the distribution of wealth changed enormously. In the Eisenhower years, long before that, when we built almost 50,000 miles of highway, the top tax rate was 92%. When Reagan came in, it got lowered to about 30%. Now it's like 15%. I'm talking about the people who have the most money, and some of them pay no taxes, as we know. So, and the people who make a moderate amount of money pay 30 or 40%. So that distribution of wealth had a tremendous effect on everything in this country. And the third thing is a lack of competition. We have a few, there's a few Googles and Amazons and Ubers and QuickBooks and a few major companies, and there aren't any little ones anymore. So these three things were the reason when the virus hit us in February, we had no tests and no masks and no gowns and no chemicals to process the tests and no staff to do contact tracing. The cupboard was empty, and it wasn't anybody single person's fault, but it was the fault of these three themes and how they crept along and they changed this country. So keep that in mind as I go through this presentation. You'll see reflections of this constantly. I'll try to point them out when I can, but they have an impact on almost every part of this plan, and they're the reason we're in the mess we're in. And we can reverse some parts of it, but mostly I think we have to get around it.
Okay. So what are the essential elements of this plan?
Okay, basically three. We need to restructure the school year, mostly so we can hold classes outdoors. We know that the spread of the virus is a lot less outdoors. And in the northern states particularly, we have some cold months. So if we ran a regular school year from September to June, we'd have school mostly during the cold months. So I think the school year has to change to be, at least while we have this problem, from March through November and take winter off. The second thing is we have to restructure school bus transportation. We can't afford to provide school buses transportation the way we've been doing it. A lot of you are very advanced and are doing this in tiers, and you go from one school to the next. But this is a necessity now. And even if we have to change the hours of some of the schools, we have to provide service when we can in tiers. And thirdly, we're going to have to restructure the school day, because we have to optimize the tiers and minimize the costs. And we have to illustrate the ability to pay back the money we're going to need to do this. We can only do that if we can learn to be more efficient and demonstrate to people that are going to fund this that we can pay it back doing the same things when school gets normal again. Okay.
So this is pretty radical stuff, right? Talking about, restructuring the school year and, whatnot. So there's a lot of urgency, though, that you have that you're looking at. That's basically for the reason for this plan, right?
Oh, quite a bit. There are reasons that that as radical as it's really necessary, and it's also urgent. I mean, some kids have gone back to school now, and some kids are doing well in the first few weeks at least, but a lot of states are not sending kids back. They don't know when. There basically is no plan. There's no plan that everybody's agreed on, whether it's sub-regional or regional or national. In context, by late September, we had 210,000 deaths, 210,000. That's only about 6 or 7 months after this began. We had 7.1 million cases, and that's with limited testing. The more we test, the more cases we find. So we've been deliberately eliminating the testing, and yet we found we had 7.1 million cases. Of those infected, 570,000 of them have been children. That's 8.2%. So if you took our total population of 331 million people, and about 2.97% of them who are infected die, and we just let this run wild, we'd have 11 million deaths, and about 1 million of them would be school children. So there's enormous urgency to this. There's still not enough testing. And again, it's deliberate because the more tests we create, the more cases we find. And the numbers don't look good politically. And so we can hide the cases, but we can't hide the deaths. We abandoned our association with the World Health Organization. We are more isolated than we've been for a long time. So we have no allies, not a whole lot of respect. We have no plan, and basically we're on our own. So that alone creates a lot more urgency. So I think we're also finally we're foolish to rely on some premature notions about vaccines being available in a month or two. The fastest vaccine ever developed on record in the history of the world was for the mumps about 60 years ago. That took 5 years to develop. So to think a vaccine that everybody's going to take is going to come along in another month is a dream. And the faster it comes, the fewer people will trust it and the fewer people will take it. And there's no notion of how long a dose will last. There's no idea of how many doses we'll need. There's no notion about the length of immunity. In July, someone in China got COVID and fully recovered, and 5 weeks later, he got it again. A couple of weeks ago, this happened to someone in Vietnam, in a country that had almost no deaths. And also COVID-19, if we have a vaccine, it may morph in response to a vaccine to something worse. This happens a lot in terms of bacteria morphing in response to antibiotics. So it's not going to be quite the same thing with a virus like this, but it can turn into anything. Some of these side effects, by the way, don't show up right away. I'm getting to medical things that I'm not an expert in medical areas, but I'm getting to some medical things that are important. Some concepts are important. Some medicines have single or bigenerational impacts. In other words, they don't notice what's wrong with them until these people have kids. If any of you are old enough to remember about thalidomide, if you were to go to Germany today in the summer and people are wearing tank tops, you'll see people walking around with fingers coming out of their shoulders where they're supposed to have hands, they have feet. This came from a drug that wasn't tested long enough. So we have to be very careful with a vaccine. Meanwhile, while we're being careful, we can continue with a combination of physical school and Zoom school at social distancing. While a vaccine is being developed, we won't have to waste time waiting for a vaccine. We won't be wasting opportunities. We can accomplish a lot of things, including going to school while it's being developed so that we have confidence in it. So in this kind of environment, you don't wish and hope, you plan. We must plan. So today you're going to get one version of it, let's call it a model. It may not be a specific plan. And all of you can tweak it. If you like it, the concept, you can tweak it to make it work with the variables in your own particular state. I want to talk briefly about the structure of what school is going to look like under this plan. First of all, most classes will be held outdoors to accommodate the northern schools. The school year is going to have to change. As I mentioned, it's going to have to occur from March through November of winter vacations. We'll have to have 2 full school day sessions a day. This is a tough part. I'll get to some reasons we can make this work. But basically, every day we're going to have 1 session of school, or at least all three types of schools fit into a session from about 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. and another section from about 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. And so there are variations within this. The kids can go to physical school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, or more practically, they can go Monday through Wednesday, and the other half can go Thursday through Saturday. And that's a little bit better because it gives parents more flexibility to return to work. They can work consecutive days. Maybe they can work on a Sunday, and adjustments have to be made outside of school for all of this. But this will at least get the kids to physical school 3 days a week, and Zoom school is the other 3 days a week. So we have six days of school now for this to work, to get all the kids to get 3 days of physical school. Again, consistent with social distancing and all the other constraints we have. To make this work with the existing fleet and to afford it, we're going to have to provide transportation in tiers. Some of you, again, are doing this now. We have to do more of it, and almost everyone is going to have to do it. So to do that, we'll have to rearrange the times that schools occur. Usually high schools are longer than middle schools, and middle school lengths are longer than elementary school days. But we have to account for tiers in between. We have to get all the kids in one tier to school. Then we have to deadhead back to the beginning of the next tier for the next type of school. It's likely that a high school is going to last for about 7 hours. A middle school day is going to last for about 5 hours. And it was just sort of like it is. And K through 5 school, elementary school, may be as short as 3 hours a day. But I'll have some ideas later for lengthening that and making up for that. So all of this is a consequence of the constraints we have. We can't put more than a fourth of the kids in the school bus right now and keep them safe, and the same with the classroom. But when we do this, suddenly, if you had a class that normally had 24 kids in it, your class is now going to have 12 kids in it, and only half of them are going to be there physically. So if we had to do this indoors, you could take a normal classroom, you could put the 6 screens, the Zoom screens together next to one another, and you can spread out the other 6 kids. So this will allow you to do this. So one element, of course, is that the class size is going to be half of what it was, and only half of those people are going to be physically present. And also I think we will need a skilled teacher's aide in every class and every grade for a number of reasons I'll fade in and out to. I think this is essential for high school teachers because 2 high school sessions a day are going to be 14 hours long. So we can't expect teachers to work or perform at their best 6 days a week for 14 hours. It's nuts. But if we have a teacher's aide in every high school class, a teacher's aide can teach some of these classes. A teacher's aide can certainly teach homeroom in the first session in the morning, and military style phys ed, which is what we're going to have to get our people in shape. In the afternoon session, a teacher's aide can teach military style physical education and study hall. So that'll reduce teacher's day to 10 hours or 60 hours a week. And then if we add in substitute teachers and guest lecturers and maybe letting some of the geeky teacher's aides teach computer science, we can get those teachers hours down to 50 hours a week. The middle school teachers and elementary school teachers will have to work on a split shift. But until now, this is what our bus drivers all did. So it's not a horrible sacrifice. There's other things about teachers' aides that are also important. They can work with some of the kids at home. They can help some of the kids who are behind catch up. Teachers' aides can rotate from class to class. And by the way, I'm not talking about types of teachers' aides that some of you may have now, and some teachers don't like teachers' aides. I'm talking about 3.2 million teachers' aides, and we can, with our unemployment, we can hire skilled teachers' aides with a lot of computer skills, second language skills, all kinds of skills. They can help the kids catch up. They can help the kids supervise their homework. They can help the teachers with grading. They can do admin. They can do errands. And again, they can teach some of the easier classes, and they can make school realistic for the teachers and give the students and the teachers a better teaching environment and a better learning environment. And so as far as phys ed teachers, we don't need phys ed teachers to teach kids how to do jumping jacks. Phys ed teachers can now do much more important things, much more higher level things. They can start monitoring body mass indicators and weights of students and health and all kinds of things. And they could spend a lot more time learning about and helping special needs students who need to get in shape, who are the most vulnerable because they have most illnesses. So the nature of certain teachers is even going to change under this plan. Again, we talked about shortening the teachers' age will shorten the high school classes a great bit if they can do certain things at the beginning of the morning session, the end of the afternoon sessions. And finally, with all of these things, with helping the kids who are behind and helping kids who might have digital problems, and in the elementary school schools where the schools only last a few hours a day, the teachers' aides can perhaps, and even the teachers in those schools, can help teach kids more Zoom classes, even on the days they attend physically. So this combination of teachers and teachers' aides can really handle this problem. And I want to put this in perspective. While this sounds like a hardship and it sounds like very difficult stuff and very unusual stuff, and how can kids learn in this, they obviously have certain advantages with smaller classes and more days of school and teachers' aides and all this. But when you think about countries like Norway, Oslo, Norway has 6 weeks in a row in the winter where they have total darkness. Okay, they still have school, they still learn. Finland, every bit of Finland is north of Oslo, Norway. So Finland, depending on how north you go, they have 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks a year of total darkness. Sure, we have electric lights and stuff, but 10 or 12 weeks of total darkness. Finland's schools only last 4 hours a day, and they're known to have the world's best schools. So while we're talking about a lot of change here, it's not impossible, and it's not impossible to learn in this situation, and it's not impossible to learn better with some of these things we're talking about. And I'm only talking about necessarily maybe having to do this for maybe a year. If we start planning for this now and we start a year of school in March, 17 months later, we're likely to have a virus that's well tested and well developed and everybody trusts and everybody takes. We may only have to do this for 1 year. This is not an unbelievable sacrifice for 1 year. It's a sacrifice for a lot of people in the meantime, but it also, again, will create 5.5 million additional jobs. I'll get to that in a minute. An important part of this is a non-transportation part, and this is an area I'm not an expert in. One part of it I am, but most of it I'm not, and I learned a lot. There's a great importance in health, diet, exercise, and sleep in this model. There's no point doing all this work and paying all this money and going through all this hardship if our kids are going to get sick because they're not healthy. These factors are really the weak link in the system. Right now, we have about 1/6 of the kids in this country don't have enough food now, of any kind of food. We have a lot of bad food in this country. We didn't have that years and years ago. We have certain types of food that are not generally healthy. The parts of the world that did much better with COVID, for example, Southeast Asia, you look at Southeast Asia, at a period of time when we had 155,000 deaths, South Korea had 350, not 350,000, 350, period. At that same time when we had 155,000 deaths, Vietnam had 1 death. They've had a few dozen since in early August, but they shut that right down, and now they're back to none again. But think about the Asian diet. The Asian diet is different than our diet. They don't have a wheat-based society. They have a rice-based society. So in other words, their diet is gluten-free. They eat little dairy, other than babies. Obviously, babies and small children have to drink milk, and very important. But after that, they have very little dairy. They don't have any cheese, or hardly any cheese. When I was in Asia, I couldn't find any. They have very little salt in their diet. They cook with salt, but they don't have frozen food where a small package has 140 grams of salt in it. They eat very little fast food, and in the urban areas in Southeast Asia, they obviously have some fast food because the U.S. corporations have brought it all in, but they don't have fast food everywhere like we do. Their protein is mostly fish or tofu, which is bean curd. When they eat meat, they eat little amount of meat, and it's mostly chicken. They have almost no sugar. They have very little candy. Their candy is more honey-based rather than sugar-based. They have some soda now, mostly because we brought it in, but they don't drink soda like we do. They don't have high fructose corn syrup in their food. And finally, their food is not as greasy as ours. Most of the people in a lot of these countries are poor, and their food is steamed. It's not fried. Now, if we go to a Chinese restaurant, everything is fried and everything is full of delicious gravy. But most people in Southeast Asia don't do that. They also have time to cook. When you talk about stay-at-home moms in China, 80% of the moms are stay-at-home moms. When you get to the United States, 20% of the moms are stay-at-home moms. So they're cooking, they're not eating fast food, they're not eating junk food, their kids aren't eating candy bars because the parents don't have time to cook, both parents don't work. It's very different. When you start translating this into health, you find out that 42% of Americans are obese. In a minute, I'll get to why that matters. 6% of the Chinese are obese, and a lot of that's a recent phenomenon. Over the last several decades, the obesity rate in America has tripled. I talked in the beginning about the U.S. Jobs Elimination Program and which I call the JEP and the MO and the LOC, those three themes. They have a lot to do with this. So the obesity rate during the 40 years we had these three themes, the obesity rate here has tripled. In the last several decades, Americans consume 8 times as much cheese as they used to eat. A key barometer in this thing is called a body mass indicator. You can Google that, BMI. I won't go into all of it now. But if you have a BMI between about 18.5 to about 25, that's considered normal. Above 25, you're overweight. Above 30, you're obese. If your BMI is between 35 and 40, which means you're pretty fat, you have a 40% greater risk of dying from COVID with a BMI of over 40. When your BMI, I'm sorry, when BMI was 35 to 40. When your BMI is over 40, you have a 90% greater risk of dying from COVID. So health matters to COVID. And if we're going to keep the kids safe in school, at least the 3 days we can feed a lot of them at school, we've got to give them healthy food. We've got to teach them, they have to teach their parents, and our teachers have to teach our population the difference between bad food and healthy food. And if we're going to keep our kids alive, they're going to have to do healthy stuff. One nutritionist claims that only 12% of all Americans are metabolically healthy. Metabolically healthy means a normal waist circumference, normal levels of cholesterol and glucose, and normal levels of hypertension. That's all, 3 things. But the same nutritionist claims that in 6 weeks, we can get metabolically healthy. Now, I'm talking about a plan that gives us 5 months to do a lot of things. I'll get into other things soon, rooting and all this other stuff. But we have 5 months to get healthy. There are alternatives. When we're talking about food, there are cost issues and policy issues in food, and these are very important, and a lot of people overlook them, but they're not that hard to understand. Healthy food costs a lot more than bad food in most cases, but it doesn't cost more to make healthy food. It only costs more to buy it, because that's the market structure. People that know a lot, that have more free time, that have more money, they can pay for healthy food. Other people that can't buy it and don't buy it, and they can't afford it. But it doesn't cost any more to make healthy food. I'll get to this in more detail, but this is 0 sugar Pepsi, all right? It had to be bottled, it has to be marketed, it has to be distributed, you have to pay for truckers, you have to pay for workers. The stuff that's in this bottle can't cost more than a penny. And in large volumes, it probably wouldn't make, this is a terrific mainstream American company. I'm not talking about an obscure company. They can probably make this for the same amount of money. They can make a bottle of this that has, 60 teaspoonfuls of sugar in it. So it's not a question of it costs more to make healthy food. It's a question that in our society, we get along, or we allow companies to charge a lot more for it. It doesn't cost more to make. It just costs more to buy. We can change that over a period of time. We can't change all this by the time kids get back to school in March or whenever, but we can at least try to get them healthy food when they're there and teach them about it. It's a policy issue. We can also do other things at school. We can replace candy with fruit. We can replace soda with juice and water. We can replace meat with more fish and more veggies. I know the kids are saying, oh, they don't want this. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't want this. I wanted candy and soda. All right. But we don't have to do that. And we're in a crisis. We're in a war. We can't afford to let kids eat what they want when we have control over it. We can give them less bread, less cake, less cookies. And other than elementary school kids or even obese elementary school kids, we can give them low-fat milk or nut-based milk, almond milk, oat milk. There's all kinds of things as substitute for that. I'm not talking about killing off the farmers and the slaughterhouses and the dairies in this country by doing this. We're not going to lose money switching to better food. Most of the world is starving. A lot of Americans are starving. America, I think it's poet Carl Sanders called America the breadbasket of the world. Particularly with modern industrial farming, we can make more food than any country that's ever existed. We could sell unlimited amounts of food, and we can grow anything, and we can feed everyone. So don't feel that the changes I'm talking about healthy food are going to hurt the industry. It can go through a change. Our food industry can go through a change just like other industries. Our energy industry can go through changes. Transportation can go through changes. Education can go through changes. We just need a better distribution system. Right now, part of this is because the restaurants are closed. 40% of the food grown of many types is thrown away. We can't afford to throw away 40% of the food, and the farmers that grow it are losing money on that. So this has got to stop. You can now buy, now have some fun. You can buy almost anything in healthy form. I brought some examples to show you. This is just one of them. Sugar-free. Pepsi has zero, this whole bottle is mostly water and a few teaspoonfuls of chemicals, has no sugar in it. You can buy sugar-free chocolate, okay? Oreos, different company. You can buy sugar-free Oreos, okay? Kids want cookies, you can buy sugar-free cookies. This whole cherry pie has 4 teaspoonfuls of sugar in it. Whole cherry pie. I'm sorry, 4 grams of sugar, my mistake. So each piece of pie is 1 gram of sugar. Gatorade. A normal thing, a bottle of Gatorade this size has 27 teaspoons of sugar in it. Gatorade now makes it with no sugar in it. You can buy Gatorade with 0 sugar. If you want to give someone a gift, you can buy a Whitman sampler, okay? 0 sugar, all types of candy, okay? Sweetener like vanilla flavoring you might put in your coffee, sugar-free. The label, okay? Sugar-free pudding. You can buy natural peanut butter. If you want sugar-free jelly, Smucker's, a regular American label we see all the time. They make sugar-free jelly, many flavors. Licorice. You can buy licorice sugar-free. In fact, you can buy sugar-free licorice in flavors. I left out milk chocolate. You can also get sugar-free. In fact, you can get, in a way, you can get sugar-free sugar, okay? Here is sugar-free sugar made out of stevia and truvia. Now, the chemicals in this kind of sugar over a few decades is not really that great for you and may do more harm for you in the long run than sugar. But right now, we have to get sugar out of our diets. So you can do it. This costs a lot more than sugar. And this is one of the few products that may cost more than sugar. Most of these other things won't. To give you a bad example, and I'm not blaming the company because they may have other things out, but this is a little package of Nutella. And this is mostly pretzels that are dipped in chocolate. And there might be a few pretzels dipped in chocolate in here. This little, look at the size of this little thing. You know, this has 21 grams of sugar in it. So you've got to keep this stuff away from kids. This company may make some swell things that are great, but but that's not one of them. So that's how to get sugar out of your diet. Then we come to wheat. All right. Potato chips, a lot of them have wheat in. You can buy barbecued quinoa chips. Sorry, I love them. You can buy pizza with no dough or no wheat in it. This is made out of cauliflower dough. Okay. You can buy pasta with no wheat in it. Ronzoni, right? You've heard of ronzoni, right? They make, wheat-free, gluten-free pasta. You can buy corn cakes if you don't like bread. If you do like bread, you can buy bread that's gluten-free, right? This happens to be cinnamon raisin. I kind of like baguettes. I lived in France for 3 years. You can buy gluten-free baguettes, all kinds of bread. Also, and I happen to like this. I'm a Yankee and I like this. You don't have to buy cereal made out of wheat. You can buy grits. I love grits. Grits is made out of corn. There's no wheat in that. Finally, we've got dairy. And the Asians don't eat much dairy. You can buy dairy-free milk. It's not really milk, but it tastes a lot like milk. It's mostly water and crushed almonds and stuff like this. Cream in your coffee, dairy-free. Butter, dairy-free. This is made out of avocado oil. You can get it made out of olive oil. To me, it tastes a lot like butter. So these things are possible. We've got to get our kids healthy. We can get them to school safe on the bus. We can keep them safe in school, but they're not going to sleep at school, not going to sleep on the bus. They got to go home. So we have a chance to get our kids healthy. So when they're out of school, they don't get sick. And that's a big goal. Now we come to exercise. We can't afford the kind of fun exercise at school we had, the same kinds of gym classes we've had. We've got to teach kids. We've got to get kids in shape. In 1962, I went through John F. Kennedy's physical fitness program. We were toughening up for fight the Russians, But still, gym needs to consist of jumping jacks, running in place, jogging, sit-ups, pull-ups, chin-ups, push-ups, acrobatics, but mostly jumping around and getting our heartbeat up and losing weight. That's what gym is going to have to be. And we can start that tomorrow in Zoom school. You don't need a plan to do this. We have this plan starts in March. We have five months to get our kids in shape between the food and the diet and the sleep I'm going to get to and the exercise. We can get our kids in shape. And again, it doesn't take a phys ed teacher to teach this kind of gym. Any teacher's aide can teach this kind of gym to kids live and at Zoom and can monitor the kids to do it. The phys ed teachers can do much higher level things that are more important. They can monitor and chart the students' weight, their body mass indicators. They can keep track of their diet. They can measure this stuff. They can talk to parents. They can communicate. They can send a parent an email. What's your kid eating? He's getting fatter, right? They can do all these things that they haven't done in the past. They don't have to just watch the kids play basketball. They can help out those students having trouble. And most importantly, I'd like to see the phys ed teachers focus more on what they can do to make, as a phys ed expert, to make the special needs kids healthier. This is really important, and this is doable. And we can begin this kind of change now. Some kids are at school, the other kids are going to school virtually. They can start this virtually. And finally, I want to talk about sleep. Sleep is I mentioned earlier, is one of the areas I know a lot about. A lot of people feel that sleep is more important to health than nutrition. And I'm going to talk about sleep at length for a minute because sleep has an effect on what's possible in rooting. Generally, poor sleep undermines health, and it also undermines learning. If you're tired, you're not going to learn the same way. Most people's sleep cycles or sleep wakefulness cycles basically fall into two groups, sort of early risers and late sleepers. I'm a late sleeper. You know, a lot of people like this. You might know some people in between, but most people, you know, either get up really early and fall asleep early, start getting drowsy 10 o'clock at night and miss the second half of a basketball game, or have people like me who at this point, if I didn't take sleeping pills, I could stay up for days. And it's really hard getting up. And even as a child, I was late to school all the time. I could never get up. When I had to wake up at 7 o'clock to go to school, I was so sick I couldn't eat breakfast. So now if we have 2 sessions of school, we're asking some kids to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to school at 6. Some kids can't physically do this. This is not a naughty thing. This is a reality of sleep cycles. It's a biological reality that's been studied and studied and studied, and everybody knows this. And if the kids have to get up too early, they're going to get sick, they're going to be dopey, they're going to learn less, and they're going to get ill from exhaustion, and they're going to be more vulnerable to COVID. So this complicates rooting. We can't simply divide our service area into 4 sectors, as I'll show you in a minute, and expect every kid in those sectors to go to morning school, because some of them can't get up. So this is one of the many things that makes rooting very, very difficult. And finally, as a final note about health, we have a respiratory pandemic. We can't allow kids to smoke cigarettes and smoke reefer and vape. We've got to stop this completely. These are the kids that are the most vulnerable. They can't continue to do these things. So we really need as close to zero tolerance on this as we can. This is a real challenge with all the kids vaping now. They just can't do it. They're going to have to grow up and give it up for a couple of years. It'd be nice to give it up forever, but they have to give it up for a couple of years. And that means whatever it means, taking their phone away, calling their parents, whatever it takes. You can't tolerate these kind of behavior. And we have a new role for truant officers here. Right? Because, you know, if kids don't show up so they can vape, we got problems. And we have to do all of these things: sleep, exercise, no vaping, no smoking, better food. If we can get these kids in shape, we can keep them alive and we can keep them healthy. Because we're doing all the other things externally to do that. Social distancing, all this smaller classes, more school buses, teachers' aides, all this other stuff. That's not affecting what happens inside the body. So we got to work on inside the body as well. A couple thoughts on a new subject I want to talk about, and I get very excited about health: testing and diagnosis. We have test kits available now with quick turnaround results. We don't have many. The NBA certainly has them. They exist. Elected officials, senators, presidents, some governors, they get quick tests. We don't have many. This is again because of the JEP, the MO, and the LOC. We don't have competition. You know, a small number of people have all the money, and we don't have all the jobs. We can't do contact tracing like they could in China. We don't have the people for that, even with all our employment. So we don't have the tests we need. If we can get tests where we can get the results quickly, we can do a lot. But to some degree, this is necessary to make this plan work. We can't let infected kids on the bus. And so far, the accuracy of some of our tests has been extraordinarily dreadful. The first batch of Abbott tests translated into 48% false positives. Another company's Becton, Dickinson, and Quidel, they had 15 to 20% false negatives. Test Iowa, which came out in August, they couldn't even verify the results. This isn't testing. This is pin the tail on the donkey, okay? This is, you might as well flip a coin if this is all you're gonna do. We're gonna need tests that really work. And we're gonna need a lot of them, and we're gonna need them fast. And we're gonna have the results fast enough. So to keep the kids safe on the bus and at school, they're going to have to be safe and proven safe before they step on the bus. So this means if we have a plan, for example, where the kids go to school Thursday through Saturday, then Wednesday evening, if we have results that can be done in 18 hours. Wednesday evening, parents are going to have to test them, or they're going to have to take a test so they get off the bus. Well, they can't then. Their parents are going to have to test them on Wednesday. And when they show up at the bus stop, they're going to have to give the driver the test results. And if the test results are negative, they get on the bus. But we're going to have at minimum 18-hour test results. We'll assume that those 18 hours before, the kids are at home and they're going to mostly at sleep, not going to be hanging out at night during the week. That's the best we can do. If we ever get to the point we can get test results where we get the results in a few minutes, this plan can almost end, or it can end, really. A kid gets to the bus stop, takes the test. 2 minutes later, the results come out, gets on the bus, shows the bus driver the results. Kid's on the bus, he's safe, he's at school. And we can do this every day if we have enough tests. But we can't do this if somebody announces they're going to produce 150 million tests. That's going to last a week. We've got 56 million school kids. And during the best, most flexible plan, we got to test every single one of them at least once a week, 18 hours before now. So 150 million tests is going to last us 2.5 weeks. If we had instant results where we could get back to normal school, we're going to need tens and tens of millions of tests a month for the kids. So we got to start producing real tests in an enormous number. And I don't know if it's clear from the things you've been hearing how enormous this number has to be to make this work. But until we have a vaccine, this is the only other way to guarantee or come close to guaranteeing that we don't get kids who are infected on the bus or at school. So when you look at test results, big adjustments are possible when you have these kinds of tests. But more flexibility, the classes can get larger again. We can use more bus capacity. We can use more classroom capacity. We can get back to one session of school a day. We can get back to normal life. A lot of this depends on the testing. Now I want to talk about routing and system design. And don't all of you feel bad about what I'm saying. Some of you have terrifically designed systems.
And Ned, I know, and you're going to get into the system design and routing here in a second, but I did want to address, I got a question from someone because it's about testing, and you're talking about the sheer numbers. One of the questions or comments really was President Trump announced earlier this week that rapid test kits are being sent to all states. But in terms of the numbers, right? Because I think those were like 150 million.
50 million.
And if that's for everyone, we're talking about it's 54 to 56 million public K through 12 kids. Half of those are going on school bus. So if you're under your model, even if you're going to test one a week, I mean, those 150 million would cover the kids for 3 weeks time, and they would be done. And
that would be if all the tests went to the kids, but they're not. They're going to healthcare workers, they're going to soldiers, they're going to all kinds of people. They have to go to all kinds of other people. So that's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in a cauldron. So that's a great question you raise, a very important point. We've got to really get serious. We just can't throw out these numbers that sound good. We have to get an enormous number of tests to work, or we're going to have to get a vaccine, or we're stuck with the consequences. This is an uncomfortable, complex model I'm talking about. I'm just getting into routing. When you see how complex this can get. The sooner we can get rid of this, the better we are, but we're not going to do it without the tests. So whatever presidential candidate announces, I'm going to get all kinds of tests, I'd like to see some serious numbers. The numbers have to get into hundreds of millions. We have 231 million people. And we'll probably have to test them a couple times a week at minimum to get everything safe. And the school kids, if they're going to get in a regular bus, that's 56 million kids that go to school, and half of them are in school buses. So that's 33 million kids a day on a bus. That's 150 million test kits a week just for those kids a week. So it's a critical point you raise. And I said many times before, a lot of these things, particularly the sleep, bleeds over into the complexity of routing. So I really want to spend some time now on the routing. I have some graphics that'll help. Computers can't handle this type of rooting. And computers do great things. They can beat someone in chess because there's only one surface area in chess. It's a 64 square board, and half of the squares are red and half are black. That's it. We must have 2,000 or 3,000 service areas in this country. And, you know, we need 500 coders to work for a year on a medium-sized school district, let's say like a medium-sized city like Boise or Long Beach, California, or Boulder, Colorado, or you know, medium-sized city. We don't have that. We've got countless variables, and I'm going to illustrate, and the computers can't deal with these variables under COVID conditions when you have parents going, 1 week parents won't have a job, the next week they'll have a job, some kids can't get up early, on and on and on. This has to be done manually. What routing and scheduling software do really is they optimize the chaos of our failure to design systems. And I wrote 3 articles, you can find them in the archives, on this in 2014 and 2015 in School Bus Fleet magazine. And they're mentioned in the STN article that Ryan identified earlier. You can read those articles. The amount of waste in a poorly designed system is extraordinary. I think in normal times, with even the variables we can control, we can probably double the efficiency and cut our costs of transportation in half. But now, with all the money we need for all these extra things, we have to really do things in a special way, and we have to do them manually. And it's hard for a lot of you. 20 years ago, there might have been a lot of terrific routers. There are probably 100 of you out there who root as well as I did, and 1,000 who root pretty okay. Now you've been using computers for this for 20 years, and now the things I'm talking about got much more complex, and we have a lot to do. We have a lot to learn, but we've got 5 months under this plan to learn it. We have to learn how to design the systems, at least those variables we can control. We have to design 4 sets of starting point routes, because we now have a fourth of the kids at any one given time on a school bus. So we need 4 sets of routes, and they're all different, and we have to make changes to them constantly. Kids will get sick, they'll move, they'll fade in and out of school, their parents will get jobs, on and on. So you really have to route manually. You can't go into a computerized system and do all these digital things and override the things and then have it work. And then we will have to send out, once you change a route and the stop times change, all the parents of the, or other kids in the other stops, their arrival at the stop times are going to change. So now you got to notify all the other people that somebody else has changed on that route at that bus stop. And you're going to have to, so your kids are now going to have to come to the bus stop at a different time. However, there'll be fewer stops. There are only going to be 4 as many kids on a bus, so we'll have fewer bus stops. And one of the things is that we now generally use what we call shakeout periods. We generally don't even do any planning over the summer. We take last year's routes and we start that way, and then we find in the first few weeks that, well, these kids aren't there anymore, and these kids graduated, and oh, there's some new kids, and for 3 weeks we adjust the routes, and that's when we have a lot of crossing accidents, those 3 weeks and stuff like that. We can't do that anymore. The COVID environment makes that more complex and more dangerous. So we can't, at the end of the summer, take 5,000 maps of all the bus stops and stuff them into an envelope with mailing labels and send the same bunch of bus stops to every parent so that they can choose the closest bus stop that was there last year. We have to figure out which kids need, first of all, we have to figure out where the routes have to be now and where the stops are. And then we have to figure out which kids need to go to which stops. So the old stuff isn't going to work anymore. We're much more labor intensive now than we ever were before. We may need extra people to do this. And if you can find older retired people that used to do routing manually, they're even better. But there's a lot of work. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of drawing. There's a lot of telephone work. shakeout periods and stuffing envelopes are not going to get it for this. We're not going to have the tiers work. We're spending a fortune doing this now. We can't spend 2 fortunes doing it. I want to give you some examples of what happens here and why this is so complex. It's as simple as I can make it. What I've done here is I've divided the board into 4 school day sessions. This is, I'm reading this backwards. This is a Monday, Wednesday morning and afternoon, and this is a Tuesday, Thursday afternoon. Well, suppose this kid down here, I'm sorry, the morning kid, let's take a morning kid. Suppose this kid can't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to school. He can't wake up, has trouble waking up at 6 or 7. He's not going to wake up in the middle of the night. So this kid has to go in this group, but he can't get there because his house is here. So that means the routing for these kids have to go up there, and they now have to pick up this kid who lives way up here. Now you only have so many kids in a bus. So when you now put this kid in a system that routes these kids, and his house is up there, this bus now has more kids in it. So you've got to take one of the kids out of this bus and put him in that route. But you can't move this kid's house up there. So the AM routes now have to be longer, and they have to go down and pick up one of these kids to make up for this kid. This is just the beginning of this. In this system, by the way, this is the school. This is as simple as I can make. This is a school. The school may not be right in the center of the service area. I just drew the service area in 4 quarters. Your high school might be here. Let's pretend this is a high school route. Suddenly, these routes are longer. Well, then your service area, you might have to put a couple of these kids in this group. But we really can't, because if the buses are at capacity, there's no room for them with social distancing. So look at immediately how complex this gets. I haven't begun to explain this. So you can't expect a computer to do this for 2,000 service areas in the country. Then let's get a little bit more complex here. I've drawn this service area a little differently. I didn't label it, again, Monday through Wednesday and Thursday through Saturday, using that model because it's simpler. We've got different amounts of kids in the service area. Here, suddenly, there are 16 kids in this one. And this is largely because they drew the service area larger because the school is up here. Actually, it would make more sense to put this school down here. But this school was built 100 years ago. They didn't know about COVID. They didn't know what the population was going to distribute like. They didn't know what highways would be built. So this school is stuck here. So you got to get all these kids here. Now you can only get, 11 of them in a bus, or in a huge bus. I think maybe you can get, 14 in a 56 passenger bus if you put every kid on a window seat in every other aisle. But I've got 16 kids here. But this will work. It'll work spatially because the ones that are close together are like a brother and a sister. They can ride together on the same bench seat. If they're elementary school kids, one can sit in the middle and one by the window. That'll work. But look how many there are, and look, they're all over the place, and your school could be up here. So you may, if you had capacity, you could take a bunch of these kids and you can make the service area, let me draw it, the service area down here. But you'd have to have enough room in the bus to do that. You may not have the room in the bus to do this. And then look where I've got 3 high schools in this little map. I've got one here, one here, and one here. So the routing, when we had millions of buses and one session of school, a computer could figure out which buses to use. Now we can't. Suddenly it's more complex. We can't move where the schools are. We can't move where the houses are. And we got the service areas that don't match where the kids are. So down here, perhaps, maybe we can redraw this boundary so that the service area is down here. And maybe one kid, for example, lived up here, and one of these kids who couldn't get up early lived down here, and you could sort of work this out. But otherwise, all the things I'm showing you here are going to lengthen the tiers. So this becomes very difficult. Ryan, you were going to add something?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to mention, so in terms of the routing software, though, what I'm really hearing you say is, two different things. There's the system design part where if you don't have the routes designed in a way, that human element, what it's kind of like you put bollocks in, you're going to get bollocks out. I've had a lot of conversations with some of the routing manufacturers, and they've admitted that. They said, I mean, it's not a magic solution, any routing software, but in terms of a lot of where technology has gone, where there's this dynamic routing now, it can do updates in overnight and go ahead and update routes for the morning, even notifying parents. There's all the student tracking and the bus location. So that's all tying into routing. So I want to just be clear on the system design portion. It could still work with routing. You're not saying we eliminate all routing, are you?
No, I'm not. And I'm not going to also say we can eliminate all computers. We still need computers. They can do a lot of things that make this easier. And I call this computer assisted scheduling. This is more of what I did when I did routing manually. And let me drift into that. That's a great question. I want to cover it. Just let me finish some of the complexity, sure. And then I want to answer also your first question about why it's so hard for computers to do this. In addition to all these things happening, you might have this nice and neat. The schools aren't in the perfect places. The houses aren't. Your service area boundaries you can draw to best you can. Suddenly, the parent in this afternoon kid, his parent gets a job. Well, who's going to stay home and get this kid on the school bus? Who's going to take this kid? Who's going to make sure this kid tunes into Zoom? Or you're going to have the teacher's aide tattle on him. Suddenly that changes everything. So maybe this kid, if his mother works in the afternoon, this kid has to go to school in the morning. That means you have to put one of these kids on the afternoon route, but you can't move their houses. So their houses are where they are. So this route now becomes longer because it has to take this kid whose parents are not home. And this route becomes longer because it has to make up for another kid whose parents have gone around. Now, I want to talk about something else. We can control some spatial variables. Very little thought has been given in the past because we have a lot of money. Let's say these things are the storage yards. Well, if the high schools, let's say we have a model where a high school, let me fix this. High school's in the center of town. Well, this is a really bad place for storage yards. I'm sorry, this is a bad place for storage yards. We may have them in the center of town. There may be more empty lots there. But then they're going to have to start in the middle of the day and deadhead to the end of the route and start coming back in. That's not a good idea. This storage yard would be better here and be better here. Or if we only had one, we'd be better off making 3 of them. Let's put another one down here. All we need is a big parking lot and maybe a trailer for a dispatcher or something. These are variables, spatial variables we can change. We can move these things around. There has to be a logic, but we can cut down on the routing and we can make the tiers better in the deadhead time by doing a lot of this stuff. Now, when I talk about computer-assisted scheduling, the other half of this, there's a lot of terrific things computers can still do under computer-assisted scheduling. All the computers are set up. They have templates in them. You can keep track of the schools, of the kids, keep track of the schedules. All these forms can be used. They can even be used with the same computer programs. They can give you totals. They can make sure the number of the kids on the bus are the same. They can print out logs. They can print out forms. They can print out communications that go to the parents. They can send things to the parents. They can do a more enormous amount of stuff. I'm not for a minute claiming to get rid of computers. All I'm suggesting is using them differently. And why they can't suddenly adjust numerically as a miracle to what we're talking about is that right now they're programmed all the same. They might be tweaked for a certain service area and the variables will be put in, the address will be put in, but we have many more variables now. We have a few kids who can get up in the morning. We have parents who are moving. We got all these crazy things happening now. And we don't have time for a software developer to develop different versions of this with all of these variables for every service area. So to me, it makes sense. And the people, by the way, who are there without a computer, who spent their lifetime in a city or a service area, they know how long it takes to get from point X to point Y. They know how many vehicles they have. They know where the schools are. They know where the kids live. They know where the highways are. They know where the traffic is. They know all this. They don't need a computer to tell them that. They have that. God gave us brains. We have all this information, and we can use it. So we just need to use the computers we have differently. The fact we have them is great. If we didn't have them, this could take 4 times as many people. Now, in terms of things you can keep track of other than memorize, I'm just going to show you this quickly because this is how I used to do it. This is a map. Forget about the details. The big red squares on this map are high schools, and the shaded areas around them you can't see are walking distance. And beyond that, the little color-coded, the red dots that go to these various schools are on a map. The more of this stuff that you can plot on a map, the more of it you have. Software can do this, but if you have a physical map, you can put another piece of Mylar on top of it. I'm talking about a roll of plastic like this that comes in 40-inch lengths and 50 feet. You can spread it over the map, and you can take a grease crayon of any color, and you can draw on it. And you can scribble and change routes and do all kinds of other things, and then go to your computers and get help to do it. To get these little dots, the main company that sells them is Avery. You can get big dots, different colors. It shows up orange on the screen, but these are red. You can get medium-sized dots. You can get smaller dots. Maybe the big dots might be the high schools. The medium dots might be middle schools. These might be your elementary school kids. The little dots can be the bus stops. Okay, if you did demand responsive work like I did, you would use the dots for different things. But here, the little ones can be the bus stops. Then with these dots, you can make combinations of different dots. You can put small ones on different ones. You can cut them in half. So you can have zillions of types of dots. And once you get used to them, you just look at the map for a second and everything will come right back into your mind. So what you have to do is you have 3 sets of tools. You've got all the graphics you can create that are static. You can have a war room where you have all these maps and all these graphics. You got computers to do all kinds of things, and you have brains. That combinations of things will get you through. All I'm suggesting is that you have to do it differently now. Again, we'll need 4 sets of starting point routes. We'll have to collect an enormous amount of information. Before this ever starts, you have to find out which kids are going to school, where they, know where they live. You need to know whether they can get up early, whether or not right now their parents are working in the morning or afternoon, and decide which session they're going into. You have all these things to plan. Then there are other learning curves. To cover the amount of school we have consistent with social distancing, we're going to need another 500,000 drivers. So there has to be a learning curve. They have to be trained. However, a lot of transit drivers are out of work now, and they know how to drive a big bus with a pneumatic suspension system. So in 5 months, you can get these people trained what they need to know. They just have to know how to transport students and different rules and things of that sort. But they can drive a school bus. They can also drive their own kind of buses. Keep in mind also that the sleep cycles the kids have, again, are going to disrupt the efficiency that you can otherwise do. So you've got another variable that's coursing through this incredible variable. Then you have kids getting sick from other things. They're going to get the flu, they're going to get other things, and their parents change jobs or they move. Constant change. This is very difficult, very complex. Now, in terms of tiers, I said before, if you had tiers that lasted an hour long each, you'd end up with elementary school kids or hours that are 3 hours long. Well, that's not quite enough school for a 5th grader. But most of the elementary school kids live a lot closer to their schools. They have a lot more elementary school kids than they have high schools. And most of these kids can walk. So a school bus run for elementary school kids, you need fewer buses. They'll be easy to do in tiers, and you might be able to do a run of elementary school kids in 20 minutes. Well, if you can do that on both ends, you can now make an elementary school last 4 hours a day, and you've got 6 days a week of it. So there are going to be differences in the types of kids you have, and the types of school you have, and the numbers of kids in school. If you go to a very new city that's growing fast, you're going to have more elementary school kids than you will. In an older school, you might have more high school kids, an older community rather, with not much in population. And finally, there are other things you can do. You can supplement the fleet you have with motor coaches. There are 33,000 motor coaches in this country. Most of them are lying around doing nothing. Some are doing really nothing. Like 15% of them are in use. So it's like 25,000 motor coaches. They have restrooms, most of them. So you can pick up homeless kids with these buses. You can go into areas of the country where they don't have running water, and the kids would get on a bus and they can wash their hands and wash their face. And these buses, and you don't need people to cry. They don't have to be yellow anymore. The bus can be purple, all right? If you've got a bus monitor, I didn't get to that, you'd really need a bus monitor on every bus, largely to keep the kids under control, make sure they're wearing masks, they're staying in their seats, because when they got out of their seat or ran around before, it didn't matter. Now they're going to get other kids infected. So you're going to need to enforce this. You've got half your drivers are not going to be school bus drivers, are not going to have tens of years of experience in passenger management. You're going to have bus monitors. But as soon as you have a bus monitor every bus, you don't need the crossing equipment. You'll use it, but you won't need it because you have an adult crossing every kid. In Rhode Island and California, they're already doing this. The driver or an attendant is getting off the bus with every K through 8 kid and making sure the cars have stopped and crossing the kid. So a motor coach can do this just fine. For out-of-the-way trips, and I did this a lot in the paratransit world, you can use taxis. And especially now, if you have taxis that have plexiglass shields, you get back to a situation like this, and let's say you have kids living close together, and you got one crazy kid who lives way over here. It's going to double your costs to pick up that kid, and it's going to ruin the tiers driving all the way there. So you put this kid in a taxi cab. Years ago, Detroit and Chicago were already using taxi cabs. In fact, they're using them for special needs kids. And if you have a plexiglass shield, that's not a bad idea for special ed kids. But for regular routing, the students who you can't shoehorn into an efficient route can be picked up by taxis. So if you take maybe 50,000 taxis that are free, and they're more free now since their service area has been cut in half because of things like Uber. You have a lot of taxis to use in your arsenal. You have 500,000 school buses. You're going to use them twice a day, 2 shifts a day. Now you got 25,000 motor coaches who'd be thrilled to get into business. They'd be working 80 hours a week. It's a dream for them. They wouldn't have to be doing trips all night long where they have catastrophic motor coach accidents. This is perfect. Taxi cabs, you got all of them. So you can supplement your fleet with these things. Personally, I'd be very careful about using what I would call transit network companies like Uber and Lyft. They don't have the same structure. They don't have management. They don't have dispatchers. They don't have a lot of things that we're used to. So I would be very careful about getting those kinds of companies involved in this game, even though they'll tell you they can do great and they're all over the place. They don't have professional drivers. The drivers drive when they want. They can drive when they're half asleep. There's no control over this. So it's up to you. Just be careful if you're going to do that. So all in all, the COVID-19 routing is far more complex than regular routing. And we got 4 sets of routes, and we got all these crazy changes going on. And I get as many extra staff people as I would need. You may have to staff up a little bit more, and they're part of the extra people I'm talking about to hire. But from all this, if we can learn from this, if we can manage to do this efficiently, when things get normal, think how easy it's going to be to design things. So now when we're going to the government and we're going to borrow trillions of dollars because we now have to employ another 5.5 million people, one of the things we can say is that we are going to figure out how we can save money in the future, and we're going to use that knowledge to pay you back. So it's important that we do these things and we learn from it. So if we can do it now, it's going to be nice and simple. And again, if you want some essays on and where half your money has been squandered or close to it, go look at those 3 articles I wrote in School Bus Fleet in 2014 and 2015. You can probably find them in the archives. I think all of them start with managing time and space. They're all about this type of thing. A few more things to cover quickly: roles and challenges, responsibilities and rewards for educational drivers. We've got expanded hours of school. The high school teachers are going to have to work more hours. We've got 6 days of school a week that the teachers and others have to educate people, not only students. We have to educate the people outside of school who can ruin this by not wearing masks, by not paying attention, by letting their kids run wild. We've got to teach them, if you want to keep your kids alive, you're going to have to do this for a year, for us. So what a teacher has to do is going to be very different than what a teacher used to do. We have to enforce abnormal discipline among the students, particularly the young ones. They just can't run around and decide when they want to take their mask off. They're going to have to be under control and stay in their seats. This is not easy. And the drivers and the teachers have to dress kind of uncomfortably. We can't afford to lose teachers and drivers and support staff and cafeteria workers. We can't afford to lose them. We can't afford to lose them because they're suddenly afraid they're going to get sick and die. We've got to protect these people. So part of it is they've got to protect themselves: masks, face shields, gloves. If they're outdoors, a hazmat jacket, shoe coverings, and go home and wash them every night. These people have to stay alive. There are obviously many more awards. I'm not going to spend time going into it. If you're a teacher, you can never find a better environment in your life. You'll never have this opportunity again to have a class that's half the size. Only 6 kids are there presently, and 6 days of school a week. More work, but a teaching environment you've dreamed of. And certainly better opportunities for the kids, smaller classes, teachers' aides, shorter travel times, more school hours, and better food and improved health. The costs: we're going to need twice as many school hours. We're going to need 2 to 3 times as many school bus hours. And we're going to need an additional 5.5 million people to do this. 3.2 million of them are teachers' aides. We're going to need another 500,000 school bus drivers. And I talked about some of the other numbers. You add all them up, and all the extra cafeteria workers and extra janitors and extra bus mechanics and everybody else, we got another 5.5 million people we got to pay for as long as this goes by. Now, if this takes a year, which is like a realistic thing, we're going to make this sacrifice and we're going to make this work for a year. We only have to pay 5.5 million people for a year. That's a lot of money. We can make up for this in some interesting ways. We can make up for it largely by things we can control in our own transportation field. I'm not talking now about changing the JEP and the MO and the lack of competition. Those things we should probably change anyway, but that's a part of a political spectrum. We can control a lot of things ourselves. We can learn how to route and design systems better so that in the future, our costs are lower. We need fewer buses, fewer drivers, less gasoline, less maintenance, fewer spare parts. We can control that by learning how to do better. Secondly, you give me 1 good lawyer and 3 staff people, I can produce the evidence today about $1 trillion a year that's being wasted just in non-emergency medical transportation service. I have evidence of this. I just have to expand upon it. So in the transportation world, we can create another $1 trillion a year of savings by getting rid of the fraud and the waste in just this tiny sector. And thirdly, the fixed route transit and paratransit sectors really need to be re-engineered and reimagined and redesigned. And there are concepts that were in fashion 40 years ago that we've forgotten about, like park and ride lots that could be used, and all kinds of things that could change. Service could be on time. The schedules wouldn't have to all be too tight in the urban areas. All these things. Ridership before COVID dropped off, by the way, 10% a year the last couple of years. There's a lot wrong with transit. If we could fix it, we can save a lot more money. So we could get the money we're going to need this year back by doing better things in our own field. We got 5 months to prepare for this. So very quickly, and I want to leave some time, a few minutes for a couple more questions, at conclusions and warnings and hope. These things are not a menu that I'm mentioning. They must all be here. There's no point in getting the kids to school if they're not going to be healthy and they're going to get sick for other reasons, or if they're going to get sick outside of school. This is not a menu. All the pieces must be present. They must fit together. They must be performed. Another lesson is, we know there's no such thing as the Easter Bunny, right? There's no such thing as Santa. There is no such thing as a non-essential worker, okay? If a mechanic doesn't put oil in the engine and that engine locks up on the way to school, you've got a big problem, all right? If a janitor doesn't disinfect the bathrooms and the classrooms correctly, kids are going to get sick, all right? And then we have all kinds of other people. Everybody's important about this. Don't ever start thinking of someone more important than another. There's no such thing as a non-essential worker. We proved this in our hospitals. We proved this in the military. There's support for people who aren't in battle. This is an important concept. For the first time in 160 years now, we're fighting a war on our own soil, and we are losing. So there is an urgency here. We can't afford to fail. This is not a reality TV show. This is not a quiz show. This is not a battle. This is Normandy, okay? Make sure you understand that. We have choices. Sure, we could send all the kids back to school tomorrow. Most of the kids, some of them aren't going to get sick at all. A lot will get infected and they'll be asymptomatic. They're not all going to die. But if we do that, we'll develop herd immunity. Great, a nice shortcut to all this. But along the way, 11 million people are going to die, and about 1 million of them are going to be kids. So we can do that, or we can immediately undertake a range of other tasks like those outlined today. And all of you can improve upon what I presented today, because you have your own states and your own variables and your own knowledge of your service area, and you can do a better plan than I'm putting together. This is not really a plan, what I'm presenting today. It's a model. You can turn it into a plan. You can hand to your governor. And by the way, this is not only for cold northern states or southern states. This is not a plan just for urban areas or rural areas. It's not a plan just for Democrats or Republicans. It's an approach to getting these goals met for everybody. And again, every one of you, no matter what your political alignment is or whatever your economics are, we still have the same 3 basic goals. We got to get the kids back to school as soon as reasonably possible. We got to keep them safe when they're there and keep them safe on the way. And we got to get our economy rolling again. And this is a big first step to doing all 3 of those things. So thank you for your time. I think we may have 4 minutes left. Ryan, if you collected a few questions, did the best I could, but please ask me some questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Ned. Action-packed. I mean, again, told everyone that this was very complex. And what we wanted to do, too, is, so much of the conversation in the industry is getting the education community alone to look at school bus as an extension of the classroom and as education. So I think that to really realize that, school bus folks really do need to think like from a total, school-wide system standpoint. And that includes what you went through that's why you went through all of the stuff about health and dieting and all that stuff, the sleep schedules. It's not just about the school bus service. And, frankly, if we continue as an industry to keep just thinking of it as the school bus service, but we want to be looked at as differently, that's never going to happen. So hopefully, out of the box thinking, it got some ideas rolling in people's minds. Is all of this plausible? That's I think where the rubber meets the road, Ned. But I do want to thank you so much. I know you put so much time into this, and you have over your career. So I really appreciate that. Everyone, we have run out of time. Like I mentioned, Ned will be going through the questions and comments that we recorded, so he will be getting back to you. That is all the time we have today. Be sure to mark your calendars November 9th to the 11th for TSD Virtual, our Disabilities and Special Needs Conference, reimagined in light of the ongoing health crisis. And visit STN Online for the latest news and information that you need to know to be safe and efficient in transporting our nation's school children. Thanks so much, Ned. Again, download the white paper that he wrote. Go to the October issue in digital format at STN Online. You can read it there as well. Look forward to your comments. Thanks again, Ned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank all of you for listening.